Almost nothing I ever studied in school is something I've written about, which is kind of interesting. I think what I learned from studying science, first I studied molecular biology and then mathematics, is you learn a way of thinking. And I think that's what's so important about science. It's not what are the facts, but how do you approach things? Do you understand what evidence is? Do you understand, as I was talking about today, the difference between a correlation and a causation? So it's really a way of asking questions, of understanding what people say to you. Also, it's not being afraid to talk to scientists. I mean, some people are almost intimidated. If someone asks a question, then sometimes it's hard to say, well, what did you mean? You feel sort of stupid after a while. I learned that you're not really stupid, and if you don't understand it, it's up to them to explain it. I mean, I'm not the interpreter. I'm not the dictionary either. Usually people can say things in simpler terms if you just ask them to. Well, I think one of the biggest changes has been just the availability of the internet. I'm a medical writer, and now everybody is, because you can get medical information so easily on the internet, everybody thinks that they can become an instant expert on anything. And I think that's fed this huge demand for more and more and more medical news, medical snippets, medical anything. So any little tiny study that says anything about medicine, all of a sudden is all over the internet and all over news stories. I don't write a lot of these things, but we do have a lot of little tiny short stories that we didn't used to have so much because we didn't have this web presence to feed all the time. Well, when I spoke about it, I said there were two rightful places that occurred to me. One of them is the same rightful place that the arts, the humanities have. A great work of art, a great piece of music, literature. They're part of our culture, and they sort of help expand who we are as human beings. And I think that science has the same sort of beauty and grandeur to it. And the rightful place of science, for those who care, for those who read our physics article on page 1, for example, that rightful place of science is just the same as the rightful place of the arts in society. And I think physicists have been wonderful about communicating this because they have these evocative phrases like dark matter, alternate universes, anti-gravity.
Yes.
And in fact, I think now I'm remembering this physics piece where I didn't read it, I just saw the headline. I think it's sort of explaining why we're made of matter instead of antimatter, which is kind of an intriguing question.
Indeed.
And here it is, page 1, and one of the most emailed instantly. I mean, it must have just gone up and it's already on the emailed list. So that shows people care about that place of science.
Sure.
The other rightful place of science, which I wish was also more appreciated, is a way of thinking, a way of viewing the world, a way of asking logical questions and understanding what you see. And I think that that's the way a scientist thinks, and that's the way scientists, in theory at least, should view their evidence. But I think it helps you in your everyday life if you understand that way of thinking and if you use it yourself. So, for example, somebody was talking about the autism and vaccine controversy today. And that's one where people were using, on one hand, scientists were talking about the science, saying the vaccines were not related. And on the other side were people who were using anecdotes. If you don't understand the difference between scientific evidence and anecdotes, you're hurting yourself. You're hurting yourself in lots of ways. You may be depriving your child of a vaccine. You may be depriving yourself of a proven treatment because someone told you, oh, I wouldn't take that treatment, I had side effects. So I think that it's a way of thinking that's important and is often forgotten when people talk about the place of science. I guess I would say that science has so much more richness and depth than is often appreciated. And if you think of it as just a science museum or a science class or a lab in school, you're really missing everything. It's like saying paint by numbers is painting, or I learned to read Dick and Jane, and so I understand what a great novel is all about. There's a lot more to science, and it's not necessarily that unapproachable. So I guess I would say that I wish that the role of science in society, or the two roles that I've described, were more fully appreciated, and that people didn't steer away from science thinking that it was cold and uninteresting. It didn't really have any sort of human emotion. It's all full of human emotion, and it's all about who we are.